All footage of the Game Boy games in this video is property of Star Mario 12 and Spectre227. Links to both of their channels are in the description. Some may say that Crash Bandicoot and the Wrath of Cortex is a good game. And some may say that they enjoy competitive puking. So, Wrath was not a very good game. I think we're all aware of that by now. So, when the next Crash game was on Game Boy, we didn't get our hopes up very well. But who knows? Maybe this game could have some untapped potential, and okay, let's stop softening this up and review it already. Crash Bandicoot: The Huge Adventure was the first of 3 Game Boy exclusive Crash games that would be developed by a company known as Vicarious Visions. Yes, I understand they made a GBA port of Crash Nitro Kart, and no, I don't care. So the story of this game is that Cortex has created a new device called the Planet Minimizer, which he uses to shrink the Earth down to the size of a grapefruit. Interesting thing, actually doing so would create a black hole. A black hole is formed when the entire mass of an object is collapsed into a certain amount of space known as the Schwarzschild radius. Its density would become so great that its gravitational pull would become so great that not even light could escape it. So technically, if Cortex were to shrink the Earth, then he would create a black hole, and as you can imagine, the story of this game is practically non-existent. So why the fuck am I explaining it? I have no idea. The Huge Adventure is a bit of a difficult game to critique. I mean, it's pretty lackluster, but what did you expect? It's for the Game Boy. The Huge Adventure is laid out like the classic Crash games. You need to collect 5 crystals and then fight a boss. After you defeat all 4 bosses, the game ends. There are only 20 levels this time around, which kinda sucks. The levels this time are entirely 2D, with a few exceptions. See, this is pretty odd. Wasn't the whole gimmick with Crash that he was a 3D Mario? Well, not this Mario, but this Mario? Doesn't removing the 3D element kinda ruin that? I guess I'm nitpicking. After all, it's a fucking Game Boy game. However, I am allowed to complain about the controls of this game. They feel particularly stiff and awkward. It feels like there's a very slight delay in your jumps, and in a platform game that does not help. A lot of the time I felt like my deaths were cheap. You can't really tell because I had to use someone else's footage. Yes, sadly I cannot record Game Boy games, you'll just have to take my word for it. The levels of this game do not feel designed well at all. Now, this is partly due to the fact that the game's on Game Boy, but the screen does not feel zoomed out enough. There are a lot of times in this game where you get hit by something that you wouldn't have had time to react to, or times where you would make a leap of faith downwards expecting to land on a platform only to fall to your death. It's incredibly annoying. Once in the final level, I kept dying on one spot because I couldn't land on the platform below me. Every time I tried to land, I would overshoot or undershoot the jump. I lost 10 lives on one spot. Outside of the bad level design, the levels feel, for the most part, bland. Pretty much every level is just a reskin of a Crash 2 or 3 level. Another problem with this game are its bosses. To call them shitty would be an understatement. Every boss's pattern is incredibly predictable. It doesn't take much thought to defeat them at all. Even the final boss manages to be pretty pathetic, and wait a minute. Isn't Crash supposed to be super small? Then why are him and Cortex the same size in this fight?
Attention everybody, I'd like to propose a toast to continuity errors.
Upon beating each boss, you gain a new power. This time you only get 4. You get the Super Body Slam, which is literally pointless, the Double Jump, which will save your life, the Super Spin, which feels unresponsive at times, and the Super Dash, which lets you run faster. This game features the return of gems and relics. The gems in this game are incredibly tedious to deal with, as each level contains a ridiculous amount of boxes. It's a bit difficult to explain, but breaking boxes in this game doesn't come as smooth or satisfying. Boxes feel almost like they're resistant to your spin. You can't spin through a group of boxes, as your spin can only break about 2 boxes at a time. This makes getting gems incredibly annoying. Not only that, but the bonus rounds in this game are so obnoxious. They remind me less of a platforming game and more of a puzzle game. Even if you know how to get the gem, it can still be a pain because of the irritating control. Relics also feel tedious. You can't seamlessly break through boxes like you would in Warped, but even if you could, they still feel out of place. I said it in my Warped review and I'll say it again. The classic Crash formula does not work when you have a clock over your head. Levels in this game don't feel like they were designed to compensate for the additional challenge. Either design your game like Donkey Kong Country so that it can be played as fast as possible, or don't include the goddamn relics. You can't do one without the other. You can't fucking cherry pick. It's not a fair challenge. It doesn't feel fun or exciting. It's monotonous and out of place, and it sucks so much fucking fun out of the finished product. You can't tell me to ignore them either, because they take up a third of the fucking game and are required for the true ending. Of course, with Warped, the other 2/3 are pretty entertaining. Some of the vehicles are fun and so are the levels. This game lacks that. Of course, it's quite not as terrible as the Wrath of Cortex, but it's pretty weak. As for the graphics, they look pretty abysmal. I can't complain too much because it is just a Game Boy game, but practically all of the assets are just scaled down versions of the PS1 models. Certain elements of this game actually look very nice. The walls on the polar bear level stand out to me in particular, but most of the levels look fake and lifeless. You've also probably noticed at this point that most of the music I've been using isn't from the game, and that's because the music in this game sucks. All of the songs in this game are just filtered down versions of the classic themes. The filtered down music in this game feels bland and annoying, especially on the future levels. Also, they fucked up on the boss themes. Like, they legitimately played the wrong theme for the first 3 bosses. Now, I understand that this game isn't one that's really supposed to be compared to the classics because, well, it's on the fucking Game Boy, but it doesn't feel well designed in the slightest. The level design is bland, the music sucks, the bosses are terrible, and the controls are awkward. If you're looking for a casual game to kill time, then I guess you can like this game. But if you're looking for a Game Boy Crash game, I would skip this one. I would instead go for this game's sequel, Crash Bandicoot 2 Entranced. Not to be confused with Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. Yeah, I don't know what the 2 is doing there. I would consider Entranced a huge improvement over its predecessor, but as a standalone title, it's roughly mediocre. One interesting note of Entranced is that its story is actually pretty interesting. Not necessarily good, just interesting. Oh, come on. Crash games never had good stories. Nobody played Crash Bandicoot for its story, so stop complaining that Titans. Entrance is an interesting little gem, as it offers many new things, some of which I like and others I can do without. The story is that Uka Uka is sick of Cortex failing, so has instead hired Trippy to take care of Crash. No, I'm not kidding. Cortex isn't even in this game. In fact, this is the only Crash game that doesn't have Cortex in it. But that's not the real— Shut up! Trippy has created an assistant to help in capturing Crash named Entrance. Entrance caught Coco and Crunch and made them evil. Entrance then tried to capture Crash, but Aku Aku was able to pull Crash out in time. Thus, a malfunction occurred, and instead they ended up with a fake Crash. This is actually pretty cool, as it's the first time fake Crash is involved in the story. See, fake Crash existed in Warped and CTR as an Easter egg. In Warped, he would show up in certain levels after you got 100%, and in CTR, he was a playable character that you could unlock for getting all the purple tokens. Probably this game's biggest strength is the fact that it tries a lot of new things, some of which don't work, but one of which I fucking love. But we'll get on with that later. Crash, right off the bat, already has some moves from the Huge Adventure. He doesn't need to unlock the double jump or the super body slam, which is nice. However, this game still runs on the Huge Adventure's engine. Levels this time are instead divided on a map, which is interesting. It's not a straight map though, it branches into 2 different paths. It's more or less just an aesthetic change. It's practically the same thing as the Warp Room. The levels of this game are an interesting topic. If we're to compare the Huge Adventure and Entrance, there becomes a debate of quantity versus quality. On one hand, the Huge Adventure had more non-vehicle level types, but on the other, the Entrance levels are far superior in design, and the variety between vehicles is greater in Entrance. Levels this time feel like they have more in them. They don't feel as bland as the Huge Adventures, and they aren't all carbon copies of Crash 2 and 3's. For the most part, the levels are actually somewhat enjoyable. The vehicles control considerably well, and the platforming levels have more variety than that of the Huge Adventures. But unfortunately, one of the vehicles in this game just sucks. and that would be the rolling ball. I hated this fucking thing in the Wrath of Cortex, and I hate it just as much here. This time you can press the A button to brake and the B button to accelerate. The attention to control is nice, but I don't particularly give a shit because I don't like controlling this thing at all. Making the ball control better is like polishing a turd. At the end of the day, it's still shit regardless of how shiny. However, I can say that I would take Coco's levels and the surfboard over these goddamn flying levels any day. The graphics of this game look better than the Huge Adventures. The cutscenes are now animated GIFs instead of still JPEGs.
Now that's top quality!
This game does do its fair share of borrowing from the classic Crash games, but it also has its own unique arsenal of original assets as well. The music here is also improved. Songs this time aren't just downgraded versions of the classic themes, but instead full-on remixes. The remixes sound nice and don't get too repetitive or sound too bad. This game also features some original pieces as well, most of which I really like. Run from the Sun stands out as a favorite. However, it also reuses some songs from the Huge Adventure, all of which stick out like a sore thumb, such as the Turtle Woods D-Make and the bonus round theme. But for the most part, the soundtrack is pretty good. The goal of the levels is to obtain crystals, which are usually placed along the main path, and you know this already. To get to a boss, however, you need to instead get all the crystals in the area of a map leading up to that boss. There are 5 bosses in this game: Evil Crunch, Evil Coco, Fake Crash, Entranced, and Entrippy. With the exception of one, I actually found the bosses of this game to be rather enjoyable. They were all original, they all tried out new things, and I would say they worked. That is, except for one. Entrippy. This guy is supposed to be the final boss, but his boss fight in this game is pitiful. Not as disappointing as Crash 2's, but it'd make a good runner-up. His boss fight, and I shit you not, was literally a downgraded 2D version of his warp fight, which wasn't the most phenomenal boss in that game either. I mean, don't get me wrong, his boss fight was awesome, but the real best boss of Crash 3 was Dingodile. I think this is pretty obvious, right?
This fight is absolutely amazing.
Otherwise, I found the bosses fine. They were memorable and challenging. Speaking of challenge, this game can get pretty damn hard. Putting aside the fact that it uses the Huge Adventure's shitty engine, the levels still feel hard by design. I mean, this game isn't bash hard, but it's pretty fucking difficult. The bosses give you power-ups like last time, but this time you get 2 new ones. You get the Super Jump and the Super Slide. Both seem useful, but also gimmicky. Gimmicky meaning I only find myself using them when the game clearly wants me to. The powers aren't as nicely integrated into the levels as warps were, and it tends to kinda take you out. Entrance is the any % final boss, however, the true final boss is Entrippy. But there is one thing I love about this game, and I'm bringing it up now. Unlocking Entrippy and getting the true ending does not require the relics. The relics are still there, but they aren't a requirement, and I fucking love this idea. Crash 3 was just obnoxious when you got to the final boss and got a pathetic ending telling you to get until you wasted your time on the fucking shitty fucking fucky fuck relics, you couldn't see how the game actually ended. Entranced true ending can be accessed without getting a single relic.
Praise the Lord, everybody, listen.
The relics are there for the completionists, not mandated for people who just want to play the damn game. However, there is another way to get to Entrippy. This game introduces a new collectible named Gem Shards. Yes, gems are still here, but now we also have Gem Shards. Broken pieces of the gems that when collected allow you to unlock a gem associated with that color. After you get all 12 shards and all 3 gems, you get to fight Entrippy. If there is one trait of this game that I can mandate all future installments follow, it is this. Don't make the shitty relics a requirement. Relics? Okay, that was a little excessive, but you get the idea. Of course, this doesn't change the fact that the relics are still there. They feel just as out of place and obnoxious as ever. But it's a bit more excusable because they are a requirement. However, the gems in this game are a fucking nightmare. And I mean, they are just atrocious. Just as bad, if not worse, than the Huge Adventures. Getting all the boxes in the level isn't simple yet challenging. If you don't make a leap of faith on every single inconveniently placed pit, you risk the possibility of missing one of the game's secret paths, which are full of boxes and nitro counters and other crap. Gems also aren't required for the true ending, but they're still there. Okay, this goes for both gems and relics. If they are, in this game at least, tedious and irritating to collect, don't serve any real engagement